And we're live.
Yes, we are. So I was, driving up to help my folks with something who are in West Palm Beach, and kind of working my way through rush hour traffic in Boca, making my way there, and I see these condo buildings and such, and they're definitely doing all of the structural integrity work that the new laws have required them to do. I see it. I mean, I was going through like Boca, Villa Rica, excuse me, and some of those places. I mean, they're doing obviously a lot of work on all these buildings that are a little older. And I keep thinking about all the stuff that's been happening with this condo crisis. And my question to you, Larry Mastropieri, as we get this episode started, is it getting better with the condo crisis? From what you've seen so far, I mean, you're out in the field, you're working with these people, you see what's happening. What is your gut feeling on this up to this point, now that we're about a year in, roughly? Lost you on the mic. But anyway, no, because you got the new condo safety law revisiting Senate Bill 4D. If you've seen some of our previous videos on that, Larry, it went in depth with all the domino effects, or excuse me, the dominoes that have been falling in light of what has happened. I have no idea what just happened, man. But anyway, one of the things I had noticed was how everybody is freaking out because the condo fees are tripling or quadrupling. Obviously, inflation and increased fees is one thing, but the reality is you're dealing with people, for the most part, that are living on fixed income. So, it's like, yeah, maybe 20, 30 years ago when they weren't retired, of course, they could be able to work around that and make ends meet. But this is different. They're retired. So, they're obviously trying to sell these places, and it's not working out at all. If you've been following the news at all, I'm sure you've seen some of this, where you have lawmakers that are really struggling to find that balance between making the necessary safety improvements and at the same time sort of trying to offset the financial burden on these owners, in particular the retirees. It's kind of a mess. Not to get too dramatic about the whole thing, but Florida Rep Mike Caruso had warned this caused the quote unquote next wave of homeless people potentially. There you are. How are you doing, Larry?
I'm great. How are you, John?
Doing better now, just talking to myself and anybody who's out there, just seeing what's happening. But what I was just saying is how, obviously the balance right now is trying to find that balance between making all the necessary improvements structurally to these buildings so we don't have a repeat of the tragedy back in 2021 with the Surfside condo collapse, and at the same time trying to lighten the financial burden on condo residents, because these aren't just normal working people. In most cases, they're people that are retired, they're living on a fixed income. It's such an obvious case of kicking the can down the street, where I'm sure in the past you had retirees who saw this and like, well, I'm probably not going to live long enough to see what happens with this anyway. So what do we care? Why are we going to have reserves for any sort of structural, repairs and whatnot? It's been a mess. So going back to my original question, you're out in the field, you work with a lot of these people. What is your gut reaction? Is this getting better?
I think over time, all this is going to get better, just because buildings are going to get more stuff done, and the big question marks around what's coming is going to be less, right? Because they're going to have done their engineering studies, et cetera, et cetera. But I think the question first to start with, or how to divvy this up, or how to understand this, is first understand that this is mostly a discussion about older buildings, although like 90% of the buildings in the area are older. So high-end quality buildings or new construction, it's kind of on some level exempt from this. They are experiencing the overall slowing or softening of the market, but not like the condos that need work, or the 1970s type buildings that have deferred maintenance on them do, right? So I think those buildings, we're still seeing a lot of let's call it market softness, harder to sell. So I think that's generally the theme here. And there's still a lot of questions around things that are coming. But there's buyers out there. We're doing condo deals. We're representing buyers.
Well, that's good.
Not just putting listings up and letting them sit there. We're also selling to or representing buyers, and they're buying condos. It's happening. It's just slowed down quite a bit, and there's a bit of fear around it, and there's a lot of due diligence work that needs to be done to make sure they can finance the unit they're buying, or just make sure there's not some pending assessment. Right now, we're dealing with one where we went under contract like last week. There's a meeting on the 13th, and the expectation is they're going to levy a big assessment. And so who pays for that? And like, are they actually going to tell us an actual number at that moment? Because they can talk about an assessment, they can levy an assessment, but if they don't like issue a number per unit that's owed or due, how do we know how do we even like say buyer pays it or seller pays it? Because we don't have a number. We just have like, yeah, we agree, we're going to charge everybody an assessment for this thing, but we haven't decided how much that's going to cost yet.
So is there a negotiation to that when you're working with condo units, who's going to pick up the tab? Like their portion of it?
Yeah. So generally speaking, right now, what we've seen is a great question. Most condo deals, the seller is paying the current assessment,
right,
or whatever the month, like, because usually it's like, okay, call it like a $20,000 assessment, and they can pay it over 2 years as an example, and so they're paying monthly towards the assessment. The seller pays that in full at closing, whatever that is. But then the gray area is like between effective date, the day the contract signed, and the day the closing happens. If there's anything new that pops up, who pays for that? And again, where like, do we have clarity around what that number is going to be? And so usually, if you're representing the buyer, you're like trying to get language in the contract that states explicitly this happens, right? The seller pays all of it. And so we're dealing with one right now where we're adding additional language to just extra protect the buyer in this circumstance. So
yeah. I mean, are there a lot of assurances that your buyer needs? I mean, do you kind of have to have a pep talk with them, be like, hey, the condo thing, it's okay, this will be all taken care of. Condos are still okay to live in, that sort of thing?
Yeah. From my perspective, it's more protect the deposit on your representing the buyer for as long as you can. And then like this morning, we got on a call and I said, hey, you've received all the condo docs as of Monday. As soon as you've received every condo doc, which we've organized and gathered, it took us a week to get them. And so we get them like in piecemeal all week, because like it's almost like these condos, every time we do a condo deal, it's like the first time they've ever sold a condo in the building, these associations. So we gather and get each document, meeting minutes, budget, condo declaration. You go down the list of all these documents. And then usually those documents create more questions. So then we got to get questions answered. So we go through that whole process. And once we have everything, the clock starts for the right of rescission. And so this morning, it was a 3-day right of rescission. So today was the last day. So we're like, hey, quick call. Today's the last day. If you don't feel comfortable about what you've learned, speak now, or forever hold your peace on this, right?
Yeah.
Or you're doing the deal, or your deposit's at risk. So I want to make sure you're okay with the litigation we uncovered during this, because there's always litigation. Like something's being litigated. It's a condo building, and somebody's doing something. Somebody's suing somebody. In this case, they were suing. In this case, the condo decided not to pay a contractor the last $50,000 for work, because the contractor supposedly didn't do it properly. And so then the contractor's suing them, and they're suing. So it's like 50 grand over, a couple hundred units. Like, that's not really a big deal. But if it was like, in some cases, it's like a big insurance claim, and it's like $3 million litigation, and it's like, okay, that's a different discussion. So in this case, he's like, our buyer's just like, yeah, that's okay. No problem. I'm good with that. Okay, great. We nailed that down. Okay, let's talk about all the other things that are going on. Like, hey, the special assessment that's probably going to come in 6 days. How do we feel about that? Right. So we go through that and we just protect deposits. Like that's my goal. Like, let's talk about protect your deposit and make sure you feel good about this as we go through this process. So,
I feel like it's one of the rare times that I actually sympathize a little bit with the state lawmakers who are trying to solve this problem. I mean, regardless of your political affiliation, after the Champlain Towers collapse, it was one of those eye-opening moments that you realize something had to be done about this, because they weren't the only ones that kept, sort of passing the buck and not taking care of all the necessary structural maintenance that comes along. Because when you really stop and think about it, I mean, I feel like this is the first real generation of condo buildings in Florida that has kind of gone through its whole life cycle, if you will, to put us in this position. You've never really seen anything like that before.
Yeah, I get the whole thing around, like, there's governors or whomever, there's senators.
They're all over DeSantis. I mean, whoever is in office, right? I mean, you're going to get all the credit when you win, all the blame when you lose. You're a quarterback.
This is Representative Mike Caruso warns this could cause the next wave of homeless people in South Florida. Like, I mean, maybe, but like, on the other hand, I don't, like, what else are you going to do? You need to maintain these buildings, and these buildings weren't maintained. Who's paying for that now?
Yeah.
Like, the owners have got to pay for it. Like, there's no other way around this. Do you want, let me ask everybody, do you guys want to pay for it? Do you taxpayer money? Do you should we pay for it? You know what I mean? Like, come on.
Yeah.
Like,
it's a mess. Yeah.
That's a little crazy to be like, yeah, we should pay for it, because that's the only other solution. The money's got to come from somewhere. Right. And I get they've like expedited the solution. And so they're like kind of pulling forward, like, hey, we got to get this all figured out fast now. And so that's like a big jump in fees. But I would argue, like, this isn't the only reason condo fees are going up, this law. It's not that. There's insurance that's gone up, right? And all this work that needs to be done. It's not like they're making up fake work. The work's real. The engineers are going in there and they're saying, listen, you need to restore the concrete, or there's going to be big problems in the next 5 years. So restore the damn concrete. And yeah, that's a $3 million project. And yeah, everybody needs to pay 30 grand. I get it. Your condo is worth $100,000. It's like, I don't know what to tell you. Like, there's no good solution here. So
yeah. And it's funny you mentioned the insurance right before you had done your Real Deal Investing podcast with Jaron Kelly the other day. I was talking to David Parrish, who obviously has a background with a lot of this. And I was asking him, coming from a non-Florida native, I'm like, well, why is the insurance going up so much? I mean, there's always been hurricanes, this and that. He says, I don't know what the actual facts are, but he says that he was like, coming from a guy who had lived in Florida since the 60s, he was like, I don't remember there ever being a real hurricane disaster, like a real epic one that we've seen before, until Hurricane Andrew in the early 90s. I'm like, oh, well, and then when you consider that, and it's like how many they've had since then, I'm like, all right, well, I guess that does make a little more sense why the insurance rates have, started to go up quite a bit. I mean, would you agree with that?
That's a part of it. I think remember, like, an insurance company is like, they don't just like give, how do I say this? Interest rates impact insurance companies too, just in a different way behind the scenes. So interest rates go up, your insurance costs more money. It's also pretty straightforward. So it's like, that's a part of the puzzle here too. So interest rates are transcending everything. They're transcending like all this stuff. But also, yeah, there's like less and less insurers that want to lend in Florida, or now it's changing a little bit.
Yeah, it's crazy.
So there's low competition, and then why is that? Kind of because they're not making any money. It's that simple.
Well, that's the part that, if you're a skeptic, you're like, oh, I mean, believe me, if they weren't making money, they wouldn't be doing it. Which then again, it's like, well,
this is my point.
They actually aren't. I was like, they actually aren't doing it. So maybe.
Yeah. So why would you insure here? Like, you just don't do it. That's
the one. It's like, and you bring up a great point. It's like, you can legislate the hell out of this, but the reality is, if you don't figure out a way to deal with these insurance premiums. It's not like it's going to get better.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
we beat that to death.
Yeah, I was going to say enough doom and gloom for the moment.
Yeah.
Moving on to better things. Well, in light of the Surfside tower collapse, which was coming up on 4 years ago, they are building a new development over it. So this is from a Dubai-based DAMAC International developing the Delmore, which will be a 12-story luxury condo on top of the former Champlain Towers South site. Larry, what have you seen with this development so far? Obviously, wow, I love that the renderings they do with a lot of this stuff. I mean, yeah, it looks amazing. I want to see what it looks like when it's done, but man, some of the sketches they do with this are something else.
This is from their Google business profile. It's like it's there. It's
Right.
great. It's great. And this is what it was. Right? Just wild. 98 people killed in this thing. So I mean, this is I mean, there's not too much else to say here. I mean, they what did they say? They're starting at $15 million a unit, 37 high-end units. So this is going to be a super boutique condo residence, which is really neat. This is, as you mentioned, the first U.S. project for this developer. And so what we've seen from developers that don't have a whole bunch of reps in locally at this stuff, sometimes they struggle. So hopefully these guys execute well.
I think Penn, Florida would agree with you.
That's what I was just going to say. So the Mandarin in Boca Raton is a perfect example of like just not winning.
Yeah, I was going to say experience does still count for something.
Yeah. 5 contractors on that project that they've general contractors that they've hired and fired.
That's amazing.
Wild.
That is, yeah.
Wild.
But without getting too far off topic on that, it did kind of surprise me a little that the completion date wouldn't be until 2029. I mean, for 37 units on a 12-story building, that doesn't even seem like that much. I don't know, but I guess because it's so bougie and, judging from the renderings there, I guess it makes sense at 15 million a pop. My goodness.
4-year build time's like kind of a long time. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, maybe, you know what, and maybe that's the point. Maybe they're like putting in that little extra cushion because they know it's like, this is our first venture here in the U.S., with God knows what can go with like, building codes and all that sort of stuff. Yeah. So, hey, I respect the fact that maybe that's it. Maybe they're intentionally putting in that extra cushion.
Yeah. It does feel like a little ways off, but yeah.
All right. So let's go from experience to inexperience, like father, like son, and now grandson, I guess. I mean, Trump's been doing real estate for a long time. Barron Trump enters the luxury real estate space. Heck, why not? He's only 18 years old, but he will be following in his father's footsteps, launching a high-end real estate venture. This company is called Trump, Fulcher, and Roxburgh Capital. They were incorporated in July of last year, then dissolved in November after his father won the presidential election, in case you hadn't heard. But they said the firm will relaunch in spring of 2025. And the luxury real estate developments and golf courses will be focused in Utah, Arizona, and Idaho. So, hey, when you have the opportunity to dive into that when you're young, might as well, I guess. I mean, you certainly started out with it pretty young. So having that opportunity to do something like this so early, I mean, hey, more power to you, man.
Hey, yeah. I mean, but like, what were you doing when you were 18, man? Were you starting a real estate fund?
Not high-end luxury real estate. I'm not going to lie to you.
I'm just going to say, I don't think I would have been capable of running a luxury real estate development company at that age. But
I was going to say, I'm sure, one of daddy's many assistants who deal with this sort of thing will kind of hold his hand through every step. But, hey, that's, like I said, when that's your background, you might as well.
Yeah.
Barron's classmate. I'm sorry. So the Cameron Roxburgh, this makes a little more sense. So the people that he's been getting involved with are his classmates from Oxbridge Academy, which is in Palm Beach. Also alongside Carter Fulcher, who is an Idaho-based luxury real estate investor and cousin of Idaho Congressman Russ Fulcher. Though, to be clear that the congressman is not involved, in case you were wondering. Larry.
Yeah, this was I don't know. This is interesting.
Not knowing anything else about Cameron Roxburgh. Yeah, I'm sure his family's probably pretty well off too, considering they went to Oxbridge Academy. So hey, I'd imagine it's probably a family business on many fronts.
The principal office is located at Mar-a-Lago Estates in Palm Beach.
Must be nice.
Yeah.
As you can imagine, given Trump's return to the White House, there are concerns about the potential conflicts of interest. Yeah. If his family's business ventures overlap with his presidency, ethics experts warn that Trump must not have financial ties to the business or use his political position to promote it. No, I think he's got enough pokes in the fire right now. That's probably pretty far down on his list.
Yeah.
If you've seen the news at all in the last 2 weeks. So yeah, you know who's a big fan of Donald Trump, Larry?
Sean Hannity.
That's right. You saw it. He's the longtime talking head on Fox News, and apparently has been doing a lot of home shopping in Palm Beach. He just recently purchased a $15 million oceanfront townhouse, which was in an off-market deal. And this is adjacent to one he bought just a couple of years ago at $5.3 million. That was a townhouse. And then evidently this comes just weeks after his $23.5 million Manalapan mansion purchase. So Hannity is doing some shopping. Apparently he's been saving up for a long time now.
Yeah, kind of. He's been saving up for a long time.
Yeah, I mean he's dropping.
It's interesting. This is what's crazy about this market. It's you got guys like him just buying multiple huge luxury estates and properties. It's kind of nuts. It's a very different market than a normal U.S. market, right?
Mm-hmm.
This is the dynamics here. What's driving this? All totally different than the average person buying a single family home, right? And this could be the property that it just closed. This at 14.9. This could be the property. It's all in the same development.
Yeah.
And so this is what it looks like. This is what he bought. And then I was looking at what was the Manalapan property, and this is kind of interesting. So,
which I was gonna say, I guess every single one on that strip in Manalapan is usually pretty nice.
I mean, look at this thing. It's huge. That's epic. Yeah. I mean, there you go. Yeah. 25 mil.
I was gonna say Fox News has been kind to Sean Hannity.
Yeah. That's for sure. So this just comes on the heels of so many others investing in this market, big names making major investments here, whether it's just properties like this or other massive development projects, right, from billionaires. It shows that the sentiment around Palm Beach County and Palm Beach and West Palm Beach is super positive.
Yeah, and it's fascinating just how so many of these properties clearly, there is still enough confidence in the market that these places are being purchased probably with the sole intent of reselling at some point, probably in the not too distant future. It's crazy. I mean, because this has always been a nice area, but now it's now that there's so much attention towards it. And I wonder at times, how much that has to do with, the success of Trump in the political arena, the pandemic, so many other things, if that all attributes to what we're seeing here.
I think it all does. It all does. It has to do with the big billionaire developers that have put a lot of publicity and time behind, Palm Beach County.
Yeah.
Florida overall is just a haven for the wealthy. Trump being located right down the street. the president of the United States, very
right.
popular
Again.
name and location again, right? I think all of that is driving this optimism for this Palm Beach County market, let alone Miami, Fort Lauderdale, Broward, Miami-Dade, all that stuff. Like that, this is different. This is different. This is really, really exciting, really interesting for our market overall.
Yeah.
So,
I don't see you complaining about it.
No, right. And you know what this is like, what we're talking about is like the crazy wealthy doing this, but like what I see on our daily operations is like we get the guy who comes down and buys a $5 million home, which is also just an obnoxious number, right? Relatively speaking. And he brings all his other investments over from wherever, California, New York, Chicago, wherever they're coming from, right? And or even up from Miami. A lot of times we're seeing people relocate from the big cities to the less dense Delray beaches and Bocas and West Palms, and they continue to bring their money here, and they buy the second property in some kind of tax deferred exchange or some other advantageous way that works for them, and so they continue to invest here, and we're seeing that at like all levels, not just the Hannity levels, right?
Right.
So that's part of what's propping this market up and keeping it strong. And so we're, like I was telling a client we're looking at a $5 million home. You think this $5 million price point like puts you in rare air? It really doesn't, man. It doesn't.
I feel like that's one of the things I have learned in a short time, working with you guys and kind of getting an idea of what's been going on with home sales here. Yeah, that's barely a blip on the radar. It feels like at times.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I gave him the speech. I'm like, listen, market's softening, no doubt. So you might have a minute here to spend some time and think if you want to do this deal. On the other hand, in most cases, when I work with a client and they find something they like and they're thinking about it, just so happens the next day or the next couple days, another buyer shows up and they're competing. And it's like, it's frustrating. So it's not, and you're like, oh my God, I thought I had all the time in the world to buy this $5 million home.
Right.
Not the case. Anyway.
Yeah. So I was going to say, I feel like it's still bucking the trend of the national home sales.
Well, it goes back to even like the high-end condos, which we're about to get into in a second, right? It's just the same thing. It's like wealthy quality product is still moving because the wealth is still transferring here. It feels like, I know the news and other things may suggest sometimes that it's not happening still, but if you ask me how it feels on a daily basis, working with people like this, I mean, half these condo buildings in Pompano and everywhere else, which we're about to get into, are like 70% pre-sold. It's like not half of them, almost all of them.
Yeah, no, that's another town that it's, as we've discussed on here more than once, the skyline is noticeably changing anytime I'm in that area. So since we're talking about the luxury condos, how about the branded luxury condos, which evidently are booming? Because I guess when you have a brand name attached to something very, very bougie, everything else, it kind of certainly adds another layer of quality to it, or that perception anyway. We've got a lot of branded condos going up in South Florida. Particularly, as some of our notes here say, it's a status symbol. A lot of turnkey luxury living. I mean, Larry, what is your initial take when you see, some of these brand names slapped on the sides of these buildings now?
Well, what's interesting is this article states 2024 was South Florida's year of the name branded condo, right? And so we're seeing this everywhere, to your point. It tends to add a level of class to the building, I think, is usually the theme there, and kind of puts that brand's image on the quality of the residence. To me, as a real estate guy, it doesn't really matter because it's just all about the execution of the condo.
Right.
Project.
If it's nice, it's nice.
That's my point. It's like, I don't care what you name it as long as it's not something ridiculous. But there's an image and status symbol on some, like, associated with some of these brand names, right? What
right. It's not just any name to it. Yeah,
yeah, I get some of them. I get the names, the brand names that are in real estate. Maybe they're hotel brands that are high quality that are kind of moving into the residences type space, or have some part hotel and then or short-term rental and then some part residence. Like I get that, like Waldorf, right? As we were talking about,
right.
like that's
it's all about Pompano with some of those.
And by the way,
we're talking about it, Waldorf Astoria.
Yeah, what Ritz-Carlton. So like I kind of get those. The Armani Casa residences. I'm like I don't entirely get it, but it's fine. Like
right. I mean, because it is. There's no doubt it's a quality brand. Giorgio Armani. Yeah. It's. I can understand. Like I do associate something like Armani with a Class C high-rise condo or something like that.
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, and those three we just named, by the way, right? Pompano Beach. Well, Pompano,
you've been saying it. You've been beating that drum for a while. I mean,
Pompano is wild. It's just the amount of luxury condos going up there. And every time we go back with clients, it's like, well, we're 60% pre-sold, 70% pre-sold. It's just out of control. And they're not even like, you can't even go into the units in some of these things. Right.
Really?
Yeah, it's like because they're not there. It's like it's just not. You can't go in them. So super interesting.
But we have incredible renderings to show you.
We didn't. You know what's so funny, John? So on here, this just popped into my head because I was just thinking about great residences with pre-selling, and I don't know. You know what Club 11 is in Miami, right?
Yeah.
So okay, so kind of nightclub / strip club. Well, they've branded a residences too. By the way, if you didn't know this, it's called 11 Residences, and so what they've done really well there is they basically have this huge warehouse, and you basically get VR goggles and you walk around this place and you're in the 11 residences. And there's a helipad on the roof. You can go up to the roof. You can go up to you go up the elevator, step out, and you're like walking around this huge warehouse with the VR on, and they're showing you the units. I mean, incredible pre-sale strategy, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so this big random warehouse right next to where they're basically just coming out of the ground on this thing. So, years away from completion. But here's this is what you see in the VR. You're like hanging out here in the VR.
That's crazy.
Like walking around, you're you're up top on the balconies, like looking at things. Everybody's in the pool swimming. It's it's really cool.
People running thing, they throw water on you just to try to elevate the feeling.
You can see right. So you can see the views. So it's like really good at so they're doing a really good job at pre-selling with VR, which I'm sure cost a fortune. But this is like an example of a very unique brand putting their name on massive condo project, because there's 3 towers on this thing. I mean, this is like unbelievable, huge project in Miami.
Oh, that's right. I think I do remember seeing some of the sketches of it. Yeah.
Oh, here you go. Here's the helipad. So anyway, but
oh man, that is so Miami.
Awesome Miami. Take it to the next level. VR warehouse to pre-sell your stuff. Like, I don't know. Come on, Pompano. Let's go.
Right. I was gonna say, and with the AI stuff, I'm sure that'll become not easy, but I wouldn't be surprised if you saw more sales pitches like that in the future.
Totally.
What a great idea.
On the other hand, I don't know if they really need to do it in Pompano and other places here, because they're pre-selling this stuff so fast that why would they spend, I don't know, hundreds of thousands of dollars probably on the VR setup, I guess, would be my guess. I don't know, 100 grand probably to do that VR setup, warehouse, all that. It's kind of, I bet you it's not cheap. I bet you it's not cheap. So I guess naming, I mean, that's kind of cool. Naming it 11 and then having Club 11 at the bottom of your
Like, what? I mean, it's not like you would have a family living there. It's like, okay, kids, all right, we got to cut through the strip club to get to the car. I mean,
Yeah, exactly. So this is my point though. Like this South Florida thing is like different. It's just different because like somebody who's buying that is probably not, most people probably
looking for the
aren't.
family, the typical,
Yeah,
family of four. Yeah.
not. Yeah, this is a super unique market in that space, and then you go further out from there, and then okay, you get the normal market, right, where people are buying and selling for where they live, but not on these high rise luxury condos. A lot of the people that are living in these condos, they might be spending 7 months and then spending 4 months somewhere else, or 5 months somewhere else, whatever. So yeah,
Must be nice.
yeah.
So I'm looking at some of the notes we have here with the pros of branded residences being a smart investment. They do have a high resale value due to brand recognition. Makes sense. Obviously, the access to world-class services and amenities, and of course, the appeal to global elite buyers. I mean, tell me, Larry, I know you've mentioned this before, but I mean, are a lot of the buyers you're working with right now that are looking at some of the kind of stuff? I mean, do you still have a lot of international buyers inquiring about these things?
International, yes, but on some level less because of certain factors regarding like for example, right now the Canadian dollar is what we say weaker than the US dollar, I think is probably the best way to say it. So like moving money from Canada to the US is more costly. Versus so Canadians on average are like doing less transactions here right now would be my take. When it comes to buying and moving their money here. Now we're working with some Canadians that are selling and moving their money back to Canada. That's more advantageous. So we work with a number of Canadian homeowners, investors, whatever, and so some of them have decided to take the moment to sell and move their money back if they're not like keeping a permanent residence here and it doesn't make sense for them to be here. So that's kind of interesting. And then same goes for some other countries. Some of the Turkish investors have slowed quite a bit for a number of similar reasons, right? It just makes less sense to move the dollars over here or convert to dollars for different reasons. So yeah, it's slowed though. It feels like it's slowed in Palm Beach County. Might still be pretty strong in Miami. Miami is a very international market, obviously. So is South Florida, but I think it's slowed down a little bit.
Yeah.
Which I think is impacting our real estate market a little bit. That's why things are slowing in general as well. So yeah.
Tying it all together here. So switching gears, I know we had discussed this a little bit in the past, but going back to kind of towards the end of 2024, according to, the Business Journal, South Florida Business Journal, excuse me, was saying that South Florida was experiencing one of the highest foreclosure rates in the U.S., with 1 out of every 267 housing units facing foreclosure in 2024. This kind of bucks the trend in a different way nationally, where there was a 10% decline in national foreclosure activity. So Florida somehow still remains one of the hardest hit states alongside New Jersey, your home state.
I think affordability has been a problem everywhere. I think that's obvious, right?
Yeah.
Everybody talks about that. But then you layer in insurance in Florida that other states don't have that issue, right? We have seen a very strong increase in our home values. So I think that's a big piece. And so you layer in higher interest rates, short-term debt. I think South Florida specifically tends to be a little bit more of a investor place to play.
Yeah.
And so you get some of these guys that are taking short-term debt, and then things change, market changes, they can't get out of this thing. We're working with a guy right now who bought an investment property, Airbnb, and he had some shorter-term debt on it, pretty high interest rates, and he's been trying to sell it, can't sell it for the price to get out of it, because what he did was he bought it at a great price. Then he refied it at some crazy number. So he got a huge amount of debt. So he cashed out. And like now he's got nothing in it, right? Because he bought it, say he bought it for 500 and now he took $1 million out, right? As an example. So he's got $1 million in debt on a deal he paid 500 for because he refied, because at some point it was appraised for $2 million or something dollars. Okay, $2 or $3 million, I think. And I was like, wow, that's an amazing deal. But come to find out that appraisal clearly wasn't super accurate, or prices have changed that much. I don't think they've changed that much. I think the appraisal was just not super accurate. So they got $1 million. They're carrying it at a weird interest rate. So, they're not making enough money to really cover on the investment to cover the debt service. And so he's just not paying it. And now he's just going to give the keys back to the hard money lender and get out of it. And so we're seeing like weird stuff like that, right? So that's totally a thing. So I think those are all the factors that might contribute to Florida being a little bit higher than others. On the other hand, like, I don't think this is a big deal. Like just like I don't think there's cause for alarm here.
Well, it makes a lot more sense when you put it that way, that considering how much real estate is purchased down here with the intent of being an investment, as opposed to like being your primary residence, that does change the dynamic quite a bit.
Yeah, I think you just tend to get in South Florida, like South Florida has a unique hustle culture. And so you get this like this speculator, this gambler that shows up and does all these weird things. I mean, can't tell you how many people we talk to that are just doing things that are like outside of the fundamentals. And half the time we're not even working with them because it's just like too left field. It's just too much. So it's just like, but there's people we help buy stuff and I'm just like, I wouldn't do this. And they like, it's their, or they're doing like these sandwich leases where they're leasing property and trying to Airbnb them, all these other things that are like, it's hard to do these things, especially if you've never done them before. And you get a lot of guys like that are just like, I'm going to go do this. And then they screw it up in most cases. The probability of them screwing it up is much higher. So we see a lot of that, I think. And that's probably part of this for sure.
Yeah.
I would bet. Yeah. People are just
and it's
getting
like
caught.
The Airbnbs you mentioned, when I picture Airbnb investments, most of them I think of, bear in mind, not just South Florida. I mean, in general, I picture like, properties that are intended to be flipped, a renovation project, then put it out there. It just seems like, I guess it's not working. I'm like, maybe it was, this whole Airbnb thing was, it'll still be there. I mean, it's nice to, go out of town and stay in one, but it's become too saturated. It seems like now to kind of just, kind of put your hat in the ring and just see where it goes.
My business partner and I, we talk about this, and he made a comment the other day and he just said, listen, we made it. We're surviving the cycle right now, because we're talking about, oh man, it's hard. It's been like this past year or two. It's been hard to buy stuff. We can't invest. Like there's nothing that really feels like it makes sense. And we haven't done anything. And we're like, what are we doing with ourselves? Let's go do some deals. We haven't done something. And, on the other hand, it's like, well, this is the cycle. We're moving through this cycle. So as things are changing, you're going to see things like this happen. You're going to see people get jammed. People aren't set up or prepared, or they did things that are not fundamentally right from an investing perspective, and they got caught. And the past 5 years before this, well, even if they did things that aren't fundamentally right,
you get away with it a little more.
Yeah, they got away with it 100%. 100%. So frankly, for the past 15 years, you could have pretty much done anything and you did okay. You didn't get caught. Now the cycle's changing and people are getting caught. And that's what we're seeing. And fortunately, it's not like the end of the world. Like this is like, it's not like the market's crashing. So you're not seeing, so that's why I'm saying this isn't a big deal. It's not something to be overwhelmed, like worried about. And this was 1 month. And so we'll watch this trend, but Google, when I asked it, cause I was looking for trends on this stuff, Google said Florida's foreclosure rate has been increasing in 2024, with some counties experiencing particularly high rates. This trend is due to a number of factors, including rising mortgage rates, property taxes, and insurance premiums. I mean, look at that. So, I mean, it's basically what I just said.
This. Yeah.
Yep. So, and then there's a number of articles reporting on just how Florida's foreclosure rate is high, but it's not like what it once was. So I'm not, we get calls from people that are like, hey, let's talk foreclosures. We're waiting to get in a good foreclosure. And I'm just like, this isn't a thing. It's not a thing. Not unless you're like this like specialty investor that really knows what you're doing and you're getting after it and you're like sourcing these things, buying at auction. Not to beat this to death, but I give you a perfect example. I just got off a phone with an investor that we've sold a number of properties for. They buy at auction. So like, it's not like I don't know these things. It's not like I haven't bought at auction. I know. So people who are watching this might think like, oh, he just doesn't know about them. No, I know about this stuff. Like we've done it. I just got off the phone with one of the guys that he buys at auction, and this is all he does. Okay. So he sits at his computer all day, buys at auction, and then he goes, fixes, flips, and or holds them, depending on what he wants to do. And so he just bought at auction. So when you buy at auction, you get a certificate of title, and you get in a situation where you technically don't have like a warranty deed. You inherit whatever BS might be there, whatever clouds on title might exist, and then you go try to clear the clouds if there are any. And so this one, he found out, well, there was a reverse mortgage on the property he didn't know about. And so, it's like a HUD deal. So, which makes it even worse. So like, he's like got this property that he's paid, not a lot for, but if he has to pay off this balance for the reverse mortgage, like he's going to lose like $100,000. Like he's like, if he pays it off and sells it, he'll still be underwater $100,000. So he called me, is like, hey, I need who are you working with right now? That's a good foreclosure attorney. I need a litigation attorney. We're trying to figure out how to beat this thing. And so on. I'm like, oh my God, this sounds terrible. Like, it's just like, it's like not the risk level, but he buys a lot of these. And so he's bound to end up in this situation. So this is like just an example of like, you don't want to buy a foreclosure, not the average person. Absolutely not. You don't know what you're doing. This guy buys like, 5 a month, of these things. And he's running all over the state.
And even he made a mistake. You know what I mean? Like,
always.
A guy with that much experience still,
always. There's always stuff when we're doing these things. It's like, oh, the HOA wants $30,000 out of nowhere. It's like, what do we do?
And they can do that?
Well, because the previous owner hadn't paid the HOA in 3 years or something. You see what I'm saying? Yeah. So they make their claim, their attorneys make their claim, whatever it is, it just depends on how you buy it. Or, hey, you paid off the second mortgage, the second position mortgage, but the first position mortgage still wants their money. Like there's all these things that are going on in these deals that you have to be super careful about. And you can't catch everything because you're not doing you don't have enough time to do a formal title work on these things because you're bidding them at auction. If you did the title work for every single one of these things, like 90% of them don't actually go through the full foreclosure process. They don't go to auction. They get pulled from auction right before. So if you get the whole list, you get 100 properties, like 80% of them, if you did all the work on that, spent all that money, which would be insane money, 80% of them get pulled and you're left with the 20 that are actually going to like go through on auction that day. And the other 80, they may come back around in a week or 2 weeks or months or whatever. But a lot of them don't even go because they solve their problem with the bank or whatever it might be that's going on. They get out of it, and or it gets bought before foreclosure, whatever. So you can't do that. You have to do like your own hybrid search, and it's not. And so they get jammed. So anyway, this is my rant about.
No, that's interesting. I mean, again, because when I'm. The mental picture of foreclosures is like a family or a retired couple or something like that, getting kicked out onto the street. But it sounds like in reality, at least in South Florida in particular, that so many cases, it was an investment property anyway that kind of went south.
In most cases, in our experience, if a property is going into foreclosure, it's because the individual is just way out in left field. Like most cases. I don't want to say that for everybody, but like they don't know how to handle their shit. It's just straight up. Like they don't know how to handle it. So like when we meet with them and they're in that process, it's like, okay, I ask them point blank, are you going to cooperate? Are you going to take direction? Are you ready to do this? Because what this requires to get out of this is you to get your act together, period. Because you need to contact my attorney. You need to get my attorney permission to deal with the bank. You need to give my attorney all the documents they need. You need to sign them, prepare them, get all this together. The attorney needs to go back and forth with the bank, and we got to get you out of this, right? But in most cases, it's like these individuals aren't like there. They're not doing that. They can't. For whatever reason, they're just incapable. And so a lot of times that's what's happening. And they've let it get so far now that they're like so deep in this thing, it's a mess. So if somebody's like got their act together and they can actually do these things, they're gonna get it handled. And if they're just in a bad position for a bad situation, work with the attorney, you get it resolved. But more times than not, it's because these people are just in left field and they're not willing to take direction from like a professional like me who will come in and be like, I can solve this for you. We can do this. But
that is interesting. And I feel like my anxiety level has gone up quite a bit just from thinking
imagine
about
living
the
in my head, John.
hypotheticals of buying a foreclosure property. So I feel like I've learned something here today. Hopefully everybody else has too. Unless there was anything else you wanted to talk about, I think we're about done here.
Yeah, let's call it.
All right. On behalf of Larry Mastropieri, broker and owner of the Mastropieri Group based right here in South Florida, I'm John Laws for Discover South Florida. Thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next one.
Have a good night.